28 feet. This is not erosion. This is not subsidence at a geological pace. The land is dropping fast enough that state surveyors have to recalibrate infrastructure every 18 months. The Central Valley is the agricultural heart of the United States. It produces more than a quarter of the food consumed in this country. It is 450 miles long, 50 miles wide, and contains nearly 7 million acres of irrigated farmland. Below that farmland sits one of the largest groundwater aquifers in North America. Over the last century, roughly 100 million acre-feet of water has been pumped out of it, mostly to grow almonds, pistachios, citrus, tomatoes, and alfalfa. Each acre-foot removed permanently compacted the ground above it. The clay layers that used to hold water have now collapsed into themselves, and the evidence is visible from space. The United States Geological Survey maintains 135 permanent benchmark stations across the valley. Between 2008 and 2024, some of those benchmarks dropped more than 10 feet. The area near the town of Corcoran in the southern Central Valley holds the current United States land subsidence record, roughly 28 feet of cumulative loss since monitoring began. The $2 billion California aqueduct, the concrete spine carrying water to 27 million Southern Californians, passes directly through the subsiding zone. Engineers at the California Department of Water Resources have documented the aqueduct cracking at 27 separate expansion joints since 2016. But here is the detail that tells the real story. On February 14th, 2023, a field crew from the Department of Water Resources flew a helicopter along the Friant-Kern Canal, the 152-mile artery that supplies water to 15,000 farms across Tulare, Kings, Kern, and Fresno counties. The pilot's altimeter should have read one altitude. The canal reading read another. The gap was more than 2 feet. The canal had lost so much capacity from subsidence that in some sections it was carrying only 40% of the water it was engineered to deliver. Dr. Michelle Sneed, a United States Geological Survey hydrologist, who has mapped Central Valley subsidence since 1999, told the state legislature that the Central Valley was not losing water. It was losing the infrastructure to move water, and without it, the valley cannot feed itself. The timeline tells the story. The Central Valley subsided 25 feet between 1925 and 1970, most of it in the southern San Joaquin Valley. After the 1970s, when state and federal water projects began supplying surface water, groundwater pumping slowed and subsidence slowed with it. But beginning with the 2012 to 2016 drought, pumping rebounded to record levels. By 2015, benchmarks near the city of Huron were dropping almost 2 inches per month. By 2019, near El Nido, benchmarks dropped 20 inches in a single year. By 2022, at the Pixley area benchmark, the rate had accelerated to 24 inches per year. By 2024, state surveyors documented 11 counties with active subsidence exceeding 1 foot per year. The 2014 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, called SGMA, was supposed to force all groundwater basins to reach sustainable yield by 2040. As of the most recent Department of Water Resources assessment, only 4 of the 21 critically overdrafted subbasins are on plan. The geography funnels water into loss. The Central Valley is a closed basin ringed by the Coast Ranges to the west, the Sierra Nevada to the east, and the Tehachapi Mountains to the south. Every drop of water that arrives must either evaporate, flow out through the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, or be pumped out of the ground. For the last century, groundwater has been treated as the infinite backup supply. It is not infinite. Certain aquifer layers, once collapsed, cannot be refilled on human timescales. In 2018, a paper in the journal Science by a team led by Dr. Rosemary Knight at Stanford measured that some fine-grained clay layers in the valley have permanently lost between 15 and 20% of their original pore volume. That is storage capacity gone. Here is what is not making headlines. The California aqueduct is not the only infrastructure failing. The Friant-Kern Canal lost approximately 60% of its southern conveyance capacity due to subsidence between 2017 and 2022. The Delta-Mendota Canal, the primary federal artery running down the west side of the valley, has had 5 major repairs in the last 8 years. State Route 41 near Stratford has lifted visible dips where the ground has dropped, but the roadway has not. Bridge approaches along Interstate 5 are being monitored for uneven settlement, and in at least 3 documented cases in Tulare County, domestic water wells drilled to 300 feet have gone dry because the well casing itself sheared off at the depth where the ground compacted. Here is the impossibility ladder. The Central Valley aquifer has been deposited over millions of years by rivers draining the Sierra Nevada. In a pristine state, it held enough water to float California's population for multiple years. In 1925, it was full. By 1970, 16 feet of surface had been lost. By 2020, 25 feet had been lost. In one single dry cycle, from 2012 to 2016, groundwater reserves across the valley declined by 29 million acre-feet, approximately the combined full storage of Lake Mead and Lake Powell. And in 2022, state assessments documented that the aquifer had not fully recovered in the wet years between. The deficit is structural. It compounds. The ratio of water extracted to water replenished has been running in deficit for 80 of the last 100 years. The mechanism is simple and destructive. Aquifers contain 2 kinds of layers. Sand and gravel aquifers can be recharged. Clay aquitards cannot. When pumping lowers the water pressure in the sand aquifers, water held in the clay aquitards is squeezed out of them. The clay loses structure. It collapses. That collapse is what you see at the surface as subsidence, and the collapsed clay cannot re-expand. The storage is permanent loss. The scale ratchet runs outward. Locally, the town of Corcoran has raised its levee around its wastewater treatment plant 3 times since 1984 because the ground keeps sinking away from it. Community-wide, in the San Joaquin Valley alone, more than 1,200 domestic wells have been reported dry since 2014. Regionally, California's farm output supplies 14% of the nation's agricultural sales. Nationally, a 20% reduction in Central Valley production would add an estimated $40 to the average American's annual grocery bill. And existentially, if the Central Valley aquifer loses another 10 feet of surface elevation at current rates, the major north-south water infrastructure reaches the end of its functional life by 2035. Picture it. On a morning in May 2023, a third-generation almond grower named Gloria Espinoza walked out to a pistachio grove her grandfather had planted in 1962 near the town of Kerman in Fresno County. She had paid a contractor to re-drill her well to 900 feet the previous year after the existing 500-foot well had gone dry in a week. The 900-foot well had started producing sand. She stood at the edge of the orchard holding a water sample in a jelly jar, the water the color of weak tea. Her drilling contractor, a man named Frank Ochoa, told her the county permitting office had issued 640 new domestic well permits in Fresno County in 2022. He said the deepest one he had drilled that year was 1,200 feet. The well before that was 900. The one before that was 700. He told her the wells were chasing a water table they could not catch. The Department of Water Resources has not offered a timeline for stabilization. SGMA's 2040 deadline was based on 2014 assumptions about supply, demand, and climate. Every one of those assumptions has drifted since. Here are the questions. If the Friant-Kern Canal has already lost 60% of its design capacity, what does the California food supply look like when the full 152 miles is operating at 40%? If new domestic wells are being drilled to 1,200 feet to chase the water table, when does drilling stop being economically viable? And if the aquifer has permanently lost 15 to 20% of its storage volume in the clay layers, what exactly is the plan for the next drought? Somewhere beneath the Central Valley tonight, Another aquifer horizon is being dewatered. The benchmarks are still dropping. The canal walls are still cracking at the expansion joints. And the ground that fed the country is still sinking roughly 2 inches a month in the dark.